Hello and welcome to study session number 32 of Daily Memory Lab. In today's study session, we will revise round 5 of page number 43 to 52 first, and then we will also revise page number 52 to 56, again round 5 of the same chapter, and then we will see page number 19 to 27, round 4 of charge of GST, and then we will go from 34 to 38. We will do again round 4. We will clear the backlogs because yesterday we did not make video, so there has been a mild backlog here, so we will clear that off today. And then finally we will go to round 3 of charge of GST 60, and we will read till the end of the chapter, page number 71. Okay, so on that note, let us set up the pre-study session intention. Now I am going to study for 30 to 60 minutes with full focus. In this study session, I lower down all my expectations and embrace imperfection. I may or may not get big breakthroughs in this study session, and I'm totally okay with it. I will most likely make mistakes in the next 30 to 60 minutes, and if I make them, I'm not going to judge myself. I embrace my mistakes and reset my ambitions. My goal is not to achieve perfection. My goal is only to make a tiny bit of progress in the next 30 to 60 minutes. Let us begin Supply Under GST revision. Importation of services, para 4 of schedule 1. Import of services by a person from a related person or from his establishments located outside India without consideration in the course or furtherance of business shall be treated as supply. Jumru Associates received legal consultancy from its head office located in Malaysia. The head office has rendered such consultancy services free of cost to its branch office. Since Jumru Associates and the head office are related persons, services received by Jumru Associates will qualify as supply, even though the head office has not charged anything from it. Chakmak, a proprietor registered in Delhi, has sought architect services from his son located in the US with respect to his newly constructed house in Delhi. Although services have been received by Chakmak without consideration from his son, a related person, it will not qualify as supply since the same has not been received in the course or furtherance of business. So now we will recall this. Import of services with consideration, it doesn't matter in the course or furtherance of business or not. Similarly, it doesn't matter whether you receive from a related person or not, it is going to be a supply. Import of services without consideration, if you receive it from a related or a distinct person in the course or furtherance of business, it is supply. And if you receive without consideration from a related person other than without the course of furtherance, other than the course or furtherance of business, then it is not a supply. Okay, so there has to be two conditions. One is without consideration, and also it should be not for the purpose of business if you are receiving from related persons. In the preceding paragraphs, we have discussed the provisions of Schedule 1, which enumerates the cases where an activity is treated as supply even though it is undertaken free of cost. In this backdrop, let us now examine whether the items given free of cost in case of some of the sales promotion schemes will qualify as supply or not. A number of sales promotion schemes are commonly employed by the businesses to increase sales volume or to encourage the use or trial of a product or service so that new customers get attracted towards their products. For instance, certain sections of trade and industry such as pharmaceutical companies often provide drug samples to their stockists, dealers, medical practitioners, or etc. Or sometimes companies announce offers like buy one get one free. But that is buy one soap and get one soap free, or get one toothbrush free along with the purchase of toothpaste. As we have already seen that as per section 7 subsection 1 clause A, the goods or services which are supplied free of cost without any consideration shall not be treated as supply except in case of activities mentioned in Schedule 1. In view of the same, the few sales promotion schemes have been discussed as under free samples and gifts. Samples which are supplied free of cost without any consideration do not qualify as supply under GST except where the activity falls within the ambit of Schedule 1. Okay, buy one get one free offer. It may appear at first glance that in case of offers like buy one get one free, one item is supplied free of cost without any consideration. In fact, it is not an individual supply of free goods but a case of two or more individual supplies where a single price is being charged for the entire supplies. It can at best be treated as supplying two goods for the price of one. Taxability of such supply will be dependent upon as to whether the supply is a composite supply or a mixed supply, and the rate of tax shall be determined accordingly. Next, Venkat hired a professional firm based in the UK to receive legal consultancy service for his family dispute. The services received by Venkat, in case such services, okay, the first case will be legal consultancy services. In second case, such services received by Venkat free of cost or for a consideration of $1,000. In the first situation, it will not amount to supply because he hired it for his family dispute. But the second situation, he got it for a consideration, therefore it will be taxable because it doesn't matter in the course or furtherance of business or not, it will be taxable. Okay, it will be supply, considered as supply. There has been an ambiguity as to whether activities or transactions involving supply of goods or services by any person other than an individual to its members or vice versa fall within the purview of member supply or not. Clause A of Section 7, subsection 1 brings in the certainty that said activities or transactions are covered within the scope of supply under GST and ensures the levy of GST on such activities or transactions. The activities or transactions between a person other than an individual, that is association or club, and its members or constituents for cash, deferred payment or other valuable consideration are covered within the ambit of supply as per section 7 subsection 1 clause AA. Further explanation to clause AA to section 7 subsection 1 clarifies that for the purpose of this clause, such person and its members or constituents shall be deemed to be two separate persons, and the supply of activities or transactions between them shall be deemed to take place from one such person to another. The explanation starts with a non-obstante clause and therefore shall have an overriding effect over anything contained in any other law for the time being in force, or any judgment, decree, or order of any court, tribunal, or authority. The aforesaid explanation prevents the application of doctrine of mutuality by such persons. Resident Welfare Association, Sanskriti Society supplies air conditioners to its members at a concessional price. Resident Welfare Association collects maintenance charges from its members for services provided. Here, in both the aforesaid examples, it shall be deemed that the Resident Welfare Association and its members are two separate persons, and it shall be deemed that the supply has taken place from the Resident Welfare Association to its members. Activities or transactions to be treated as supply of goods or supply of services. Now we are going to schedule number 2. We have completed schedule 1. This is schedule number 2. 7 subsection 1A classifies certain activities or transactions constituting supply either as supply of goods or supply of services. Schedule 2 to the CGST Act contains the list of activities or transactions which have been classified either as supply of goods or supply of service. This helps in mitigating the ambiguities which existed in the earlier laws. Under earlier tax regime, the restaurants used to charge both service tax and VAT on the value of food served. This is so because both sale of goods and provision of service were involved, and therefore taxable event under both the statutes got triggered. Under GST, the supply by a restaurant is treated as composite supply since supply of food and service is naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business. Further, entry 6B of Schedule 2 specifically provides that such composite supply shall be treated as supply of service. Hence, the entire value of invoice shall be treated as value of service and leviable to GST accordingly. Now, let us see things one by one. Transfer. Any transfer of title in goods treated as supply of goods. Any transfer of right in goods or undivided share in goods without transfer of title thereof. Supply of services. Any transfer of title in goods under an agreement which stipulates that property in goods shall pass at a future date upon payment of full consideration as agreed. Dhruva Capital supplied goods on hire purchase basis to customers. Optima manufacturers supplies toys to retailers on sale or return basis. This is supply of goods. Okay. Land and building. Any tenancy, lease, easement, and license to occupy land, lease agreement for land is supply of services. Any lease or letting out of building, including a commercial or industrial or residential complex for business or commerce, wholly or partly. A shop let out in a busy market area is supply of services. Treatment of process. Any treatment or process which is applied to another person's goods. Davani Dyeing House dyes the cloths given by Shubham Textiles Limited on job work basis. Supply of services. Transfer of business assets. Goods forming part of business assets are transferred or disposed of by or under directions of persons carrying on the business so as no longer to form part of those assets. The supply of goods. Goods held or used for business are put to private use or are made available to any person for use for any purpose other than business by or under directions of person carrying on the business. Okay. A person manufacturing and selling wooden furniture takes one chair manufactured by him for use at his house. Supply of services. Goods forming part of assets of any business carried on by a person who ceases to be a taxable person shall be deemed to be supplied by him in the course or furtherance of his business immediately before he ceases to be a taxable person. Arun, a trader, is winding up his business. Any goods left in stock shall be deemed to be supplied by him. Business is transferred as a going concern to another person. Business is carried on by a personal representative who is deemed to be a taxable person. Renting of immovable property. Renting of a commercial property, renting of precincts of a religious place, renting of property to an educational institution, permitting use of immovable property for placing, vending, or dispensing machines. So, construction of complex building, civil structure, or part thereof, including a complex or building intended for sale to a buyer, wholly or partly, except where the entire consideration has been received after issuance of completion certificate by the competent authority or after its first occupation, whichever is earlier. So, let's say I am a builder and I constructed a building, and while construction, I have not received 1 rupee of money from the potential buyer. Let's say there is a buyer, but I have not received any consideration. I built the structure fully on my own money, with my own money, or at least I have not received any money in the form of consideration. And then I got the completion certificate of that building. Only then I received consideration from the potential buyer. And in that situation, it is not deemed to be a supply of service. On the other hand, let's say I have the land with me and I decided to raise a civil structure in that, and before I even complete the building fully, before I even receive the completion certificate, I started receiving consideration in installments from the buyers. So which is what we normally see in real estate sector today. So they, right at the time they have the blueprint of that site, and they will tell how many potential flats are going to be there, apartments are going to be there, and they've already advertised it, and the people will start to book it by paying an advance only. So in that situation, it will be deemed as service because you already received the consideration even before you commenced your building work, construction work. So definitely you would have received huge amount of consideration before you get the completion certificate. Therefore, in those situations, it will be treated as supply of service. So here we also need to say the competent authority. Competent authority are those people: an architect registered with the Council of Architecture, a chartered engineer registered with the Institution of Engineers of India, a licensed surveyor of the respective local body of the city, town or village or development or planning authority. These people, any of these people should have certified that okay, the building is civil structure is complete, and if after that completion certificate, if the builder receives the consideration, then it will be treated as supply of goods. Otherwise, it will be treated as supply of services. Okay, next. Temporary transfer or permitting use or enjoyment of any intellectual property right, temporary transfer of patents, development, design, programming, customization, adaptation, upgradation, enhancement, implementation of IT software. Suvidha Solutions develops an accounting software for a business firm, supply of service. Agreeing to obligation to refrain from an act or to tolerate an act or a situation or to do an act. Cable operator Sakaram has entered into an agreement with a cable operator Atmaram that Sakaram will not provide cable connections in the specified areas where Atmaram is providing the connections. Non-compete agreements constitute supply of service. Security deposit forfeited in the event of cancellation of tour package by customer is also treated as supply of service. Transfer of right to use any goods for any purpose for cash, deferred payment or any other valuable consideration, machinery given on hire, supply of service. Works contract. Works contract means a contract for building, construction, fabrication, completion, erection, installation, fitting out, improvement, modification, repair, maintenance, renovation, alteration or commissioning of any immovable property, wherein transfer of property in goods, whether as goods or in some other form, is involved in the execution of such contract. Supply by way of or as part of any service or in any other manner whatsoever of goods, being food or any other article for human consumption or any drink other than alcoholic liquor for human consumption, where such a supply or service is for cash, deferred payment or other valuable consideration, it will be deemed as supply of services. Taxability of tenancy rights under GST. CBIC has clarified the taxability of tenancy rights under GST as under Pagadi system, that is, transfer of tenancy rights against tenancy premium is prevalent in some states. Pagadi system, the tenant acquires tenancy rights in the property against payment of tenancy premium. The landlord may be the owner of property, but the possession of the same lies with the tenant. The tenant pays periodic rent to the landlord as long as he occupies the property. The tenant also usually has the option to sell the tenancy right of the said property, and in such a case has to share a percentage of the proceeds with owner of land as laid down in their tenancy agreement. Alternatively, the landlord pays to tenant the prevailing tenancy premium to get the property vacated. Such properties in Maharashtra are governed by Maharashtra Rent Control Act. It has been clarified that the activity of transfer of tenancy right against consideration is squarely covered under supply of service liable to GST. It is a form of lease or renting of property, and such activity is specifically declared to be a service in Para 2 of Schedule 2 as discussed in the table above. Any lease, tenancy, easement, license to occupy is a supply of service. Although stamp duty and registration charges have been levied on such transfer of tenancy rights, it shall be still subject to GST merely because a transaction or supply involves execution of documents which may require registration and payment of registration fee and stamp duty would not preclude them from the scope of supply and from payment of GST. Transfer of tenancy rights cannot be treated as sale of land or building in para 5 of Schedule 3. Thus, it is not a negative list activity and consequently consideration for the said activity shall attract levy of GST. To sum up, the activity of transfer of tenancy rights is squarely covered under the scope of supply and taxable per se. Transfer of tenancy rights to a new tenant against consideration in the form of tenancy premium is taxable. However, renting of residential dwelling for use as a resident to an unregistered person is exempt. Hence, grant of tenancy rights in a residential dwelling for use as a residence dwelling against a tenancy premium or periodic rent or both to an unregistered person is exempt as regards services provided by outgoing tenant by way of surrendering the tenancy rights against consideration in the form of a portion of tenancy premium is liable to GST. Clarification on agreeing to the obligation to refrain from an act or to tolerate an act or a situation or to do an act. Agreeing to the obligation to refrain from an act or to tolerate an act or a situation or to do an act has been specifically declared to be supply of service in para 5 subpara E of Schedule 2 if the same constitutes a supply within the meaning of the GST Act. Expression agreeing to the obligation or to refrain from has three limbs: agreeing to the obligation or to refrain from an act, agreeing to the obligation to tolerate an act, agreeing to the obligation to do an act. So refrain from an act, tolerate an act, or do an act. So agreeing to refrain from an act. Example of activities would be covered in this part would include non-compete agreements where one party agrees not to compete with the other party in a product, service or geographical area against a consideration paid by the other party. Another example of such activities would be a builder refraining from constructing more than a certain number of floors even though permitted to do so by the municipal authorities against a compensation paid by the neighboring housing project which wants to protect its sunlight, or an industrial unit refraining from manufacturing activity during certain hours against an agreed compensation paid by a neighboring school which wants to avoid noise during those hours. Okay, agreeing to the obligation to tolerate an act or a situation. This would include activities such as a shopkeeper allowing a hawker to operate from the common payment in front of his shop against a monthly payment by the hawker, or an RWA tolerating the use of loudspeakers for early morning prayers by a school located in the colony, subject to the school paying an agreed sum to the RWA as compensation. Agreeing to the obligation to do an act. This would include the case where an industrial unit agrees to install equipment for zero emission or discharge at the behest of the RWA of a neighboring residential complex against a consideration paid by such RWA, even though the emission or discharge from the industrial unit was within permissible limits. Then there was no legal obligation upon the individual unit to do so. Above three activities must comply with the following conditions. There must be an express or implied agreement or contract. Okay. Above three activities must be under an agreement or a contract, whether express or implied, to fall within the ambit of para 5E of Schedule 2. In other words, one of the parties to such agreement or contract must be under a contractual obligation to either refrain, tolerate, or do. The contract can be express or implied. Such contractual arrangement must be an independent arrangement in its own right. Such arrangement or agreement can take the form of an independent standalone contract or may form part of another contract. Thus, a person can be said to be making a supply by way of refraining from doing something or tolerating some act or situation to another person if the person was under an obligation to do so and then performed accordingly. Thus, a person can be said to be making a supply by way of refraining from doing something, tolerating some act or situation to another person if the first person was under an obligation to do so and then performed accordingly. Such a contract cannot be imagined or presumed to exist just because there is a flow of money from one party to another. There must be an expressed or implied promise by the recipient of money to agree to or abstain from doing something in return for the money paid to him. Consideration must flow in return to this contract or agreement. Some consideration must flow in return from the other party to this contract or agreement, the second party to the first party for such refraining, tolerating, or doing. Okay, so 56. We have already completed this segment till 52, and we have also completed this until 56. So supply under GST quota is over for the day. Let us go to the next segment, which is charge of GST, from page number 19 to 27 and then from 28 to 33. Services provided by an individual advocate, including a senior advocate or a firm of advocates by way of legal services, directly or indirectly. Legal services means any service provided in relation to advice, consultancy, or assistance in any branch of law in any manner and includes representational services before any court or tribunal or authority. An individual advocate, including a senior advocate or firm of advocates, any business entity located in the taxable territory. Reverse charge, tax to be paid by the business entity. Services supplied by an arbitral tribunal to a business entity. Reverse charge. Services provided by way of sponsorship to any body, corporate, or partnership firm. So, service done by any person to any body, corporate, or partnership firm located in the taxable territory. Reverse charge. Services supplied by the central government, state government, union territory, or local authority to a business entity, excluding renting of immovable property and services specified below. Services by the Department of Posts and the Ministry of Railways, which is Indian Railways. Services in relation to an aircraft or a vessel inside or outside the precincts of a port or an airport. Transport of goods or passengers. So, supplied by central government, state government, or union territory to any business entity located in the taxable territory, RCM applies, excluding renting of immovable property, services by Department of Post and Railways, services in relation to aircrafts and transportation of goods or passengers. Okay, services supplied by central government, excluding the Ministry of Railways, state government, union territory, or local authority by way of renting of immovable property to a registered person, then RCM applies. 5AA, services by way of renting of residential dwelling to a registered person. By renting of residential dwelling to a registered person. So, a registered person has to pay the tax. Services by way of renting of any immovable property other than residential dwelling Unregistered person, registered person, RCM applies. Services supplied by a director of a company or body corporate to the said company or body corporate. A director of a company or a body corporate located in the taxable territory. Services supplied by an insurance agent, any person carrying on an insurance business, insurance agent, any person carrying on insurance business located in the taxable territory. Next, services supplied by a recovery agent to a banking company, financial institution, or a non-banking financial company. It is again reverse charge. Services supplied by a music composer, photographer, artist, or the like by way of transfer or permitting the use or enjoyment of a copyright covered under section 13(1) subsection 1 clause A of the Copyright Act relating to original dramatic, musical, or artistic work to a music company, producer, or the like. So that is also covered under reverse charge. Supply of services by an author by way of transfer or permitting the use or enjoyment of a copyright covered under section 13 subsection 1 clause A of the Copyright Act relating to original literary work to a publisher, author, and publisher located in the taxable territory. How can an author choose to pay tax under forward charge if he has taken registration under the CGST Act and filed a declaration in the prescribed form that he exercises the option to pay CGST on the said service under forward charge in accordance with section 9 subsection 1 and to comply with all the provisions as they apply to a person liable for paying tax in relation to the supply of any goods and or services, and that he shall not withdraw the said option within a period of 1 year from the date of exercising such option. He makes a declaration on the invoice issued by him in the prescribed form to the publisher. Supply of services by the members of overseeing committee to Reserve Bank of India. Members, service provider, service recipient is RBI, tax payable by RBI. Services supplied by individual direct selling agents other than a body corporate, partnership, or limited liability partnership firm to bank or a non-banking financial company. Individual direct selling agents other than a body corporate, partnership firm, or LLP, a banking company, or a non-banking financial corporation located in the taxable territory. Services provided by a business facilitator to a banking company. Services provided by an agent of business correspondent to a business correspondent. Services provided by way of supply of security personnel provided to a registered person. However, nothing contained in this entry shall apply to a department or establishment of central government or state government or union territory, local authority, government agencies which has taken registration under the CGST Act only for the purpose of deducting tax under section 51 of the said act and not for making a taxable supply of goods or services. And then a registered person paying tax under composition scheme. Any person other than a body corporate, a registered person located in the taxable territory. Services provided by way of renting of any motor vehicle designed to carry passengers where the cost of fuel is included in the consideration charged from the service recipient provided to a body corporate. Okay. Next, services of lending securities under securities lending scheme of SEBI as amended. Lender, borrower, so tax to be paid by the borrower. So we have to read till 26. So we have completed this segment. Now let us go to this segment till 33. Any service supplied by any person who is located in a non-taxable territory to any person located in the taxable territory other than non-taxable online recipient located in taxable territory. Thus, in case of import of service, tax is payable by the person importing such service. For the purpose of the notification, notifying the above services under reverse charge mechanism, following explanations shall apply. The person who pays or is liable to pay freight for the transportation of goods by road in goods carriage located in the taxable territory shall be treated as the person who receives the service for the purpose of this notification. Body corporate has the same meaning as assigned to it in clause number 11 of section 2 of the Companies Act 2013. As per section 2 clause 11 of the Companies Act, body corporate or a corporation includes a company incorporated outside India but does not include a cooperative society registered under any law relating to cooperative societies and any other body corporate which the central government may by notification specify in this behalf. The business entity located in the taxable territory who is litigant, applicant or petitioner as the case may be shall be treated as the person who receives the legal services for the purpose of this notification. The words and expressions used are not defined in reverse charge notification but defined in the CGST, IGST, or UTGST Act shall have the same meanings as assigned to them in those acts. LLP formed and registered under the provisions of LLP Act 2008 shall also be considered as partnership firm or a firm. Insurance agent means an insurance agent licensed under Section 42 of the Insurance Act 1938 who agrees to receive payment by way of commission or other remuneration in consideration of his soliciting procuring insurance business, including business relating to the continuance, renewal or revival of policies of insurance. Renting of immovable property means allowing, permitting or granting access, entry, occupation, use or any such facility wholly or partly in an immovable property with or without the transfer of possession or control of the said immovable property and includes letting, leasing, licensing or other similar arrangements in respect of immovable property. The provisions of reverse charge notification in so far as they apply to the central government, state government shall also apply to the parliament, state legislature, courts and tribunals. Person liable to pay GST on GTA service. Okay, so GTA services are liable to tax at the following rates: 5% and 12%. 5% applies where GTA has not taken the input tax credit on goods or services used in supplying GTA service, where GTA exercises the option to pay itself GST at the said rate or does not exercise the option to itself pay the GST at the said rate, or 12% where GST exercises the option to pay itself GST at the said rate on services supplied by it. In this case, there is no restriction on availing ITC on goods or services used in supplying GTA service by the GTA. Okay, so they have explained it in this diagram. Registered GTA exercises the option to pay tax. GTA does not exercise the option to pay tax. So in that case, GST is payable at 5%. Reverse charge will apply. Whoever receives the service should pay the tax. Now, under this situation, 5% option is there, 12% option is there, and 5% option GTA will pay, but they will not be eligible to avail input tax credit. 12% if they pay, they will be eligible to avail input tax credit. Where recipient is other than specified recipients, unregistered individual, end consumer or unregistered casual tax, GST will be exempt. Person liable to pay GST on renting of motor vehicles service. Service by way of renting of any motor vehicle designed to carry passengers where the cost of fuel is included in the consideration charged from the service recipient are taxable at the following rates: 5% provided supplier of services has taken only the limited ITC of input services in the same line of business, or 12% where the supplier of services opts to pay GST at the said rate. In this case, there is no restriction on availing ITC on goods or services used in supplying renting of motor vehicle service by the supplier of service. In the following paras, we have explained as to who is the person liable to pay tax in case of each of the above two rates. Person liable to pay tax under renting of motor vehicle service when it is forward charge, when it is reverse charge. GST is payable at 5% if the supplier is other than body corporate, if the supplier is body corporate. If the supplier is other than body corporate and the recipient is a body corporate, then it is reverse charge. If the supplier is other than body corporate, recipient is other than body corporate, then forward charge. And if the recipient himself chooses to go by forward charge, then it is forward charge. In that situation, 12% will come. If the supplier chooses 5%, but the supplier happens to be a body corporate, then forward charge will come, but the supplier can't take any input tax credit. Okay, now there may arise a doubt as to whether RCM is applicable on service of renting of motor vehicle designed to carry passenger or service of transportation of passengers. It is clarified that there is a clear distinction between the two services, which is as under: the two services fall under two different headings in the tariff. Services of renting of motor vehicles designed to carry passengers covers renting of motor vehicle for transport of passengers for a period of time where the renter defines how and when the vehicles will be operated, determining schedules, routes and other operational considerations. Passenger transport services covers passenger transport services over predetermined routes on predetermined schedules. Accordingly, where the body corporate hires the motor vehicle for transport for a period of time during which the motor vehicle shall be at the disposal of body corporate, the said service would fall under services of renting of motor vehicles designed to carry passengers, and the body corporate shall be liable to pay GST on the same under RCM. Thus, reverse charge would apply on act of renting of vehicles by body corporate, and in such case, it is for the body corporate to use it in the manner as it likes, subject to agreement with the person providing vehicle on rent. However, where the body corporate avails the passenger transport service for specific journeys or voyages and does not take vehicle on rent for any particular period of time, the service would fall under passenger transport services, and the body corporate shall not be liable to pay GST on the same under RCM. Taxability of remuneration paid to the director. In order to determine the leviability of tax on the remuneration paid to directors, we first need to ascertain whether the director is an employee of the company or not. Following two situations are possible: services provided by the independent directors or those directors by whatever name called who are not employees of the said company to such company in lieu of remuneration as the consideration for the said services are clearly outside the scope of Schedule 3 of GST and are therefore taxable, as seen in the table given above illustrating the reverse charge services. Such remuneration paid to the directors is taxable in the hands of the company on reverse charge basis. In case where it is ascertained that a director, irrespective of name and designation, is an employee, next step would be to examine whether all the activities performed by the director are in the course of employee-employer relationship, or is there any element of contract for service. The part of directors' remuneration which are declared as salaries in the books of a company and subject to TDS under section 182 of the Income Tax Act are not taxable, being consideration for services by an employee to the employer in the course of or in relation to his employment. Further, part of employee directors' remuneration which is declared separately other than salaries in the company's accounts and subject to TDS under section 194J of the IT Act as fees for professional and technical services are treated as consideration for providing services which are outside the scope of Schedule 3 and is therefore taxable. Besides, as already discussed, the recipient of the said service, the company is liable to discharge the applicable GST on it on reverse charge basis. Tax on services supplied by director of a company in his personal capacity, such as renting of immovable property to the company or body corporate, not payable under reverse charge mechanism. Tax on services supplied by director or body corporate to the said company or the body corporate is payable by the company or body corporate under reverse charge mechanism. It is clarified that services supplied by a director of a company or body corporate to the company or body corporate in his private or personal capacity, such as services supplied by way of renting of immovable property, are not taxable under RCM. Only those activities supplied by the director of company or body corporate which are supplied by him as or in the capacity of director of that company or body corporate shall be taxable under RCM in the hands of the company or body corporate. Okay. Sindhu Transporters, an unregistered GTA, provides services of transportation of goods by road to Bindusar manufacturers registered under GST. GST is payable by Bindusar manufacturers at the rate 5%. Neelanchal Chamber of Commerce organized a business summit. Safal Private Limited, a manufacturer of ready-made garments, sponsored the summit and paid a sponsorship fee of 1,20,000 to Neelanchal Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Godbole, an independent director of Safal Private Limited, provided the services worth Rs 50,000 to the company. The value on which Safal Private Limited is liable to pay GST is 1,70,000. Both are, reverse charge transactions. Okay, on that note, we have completed this segment also. Charge of GST till page number 33. Round 4 we have completed. Now let us go to round 3 of the same chapter from page number 60 to page number 71. Who are not eligible to opt for composition scheme? Registered person who is not eligible for composition scheme under section 10 subsection 1. Supplier engaged in making any supply of goods or services which are not leviable to tax. Supplier engaged in making any interstate outward supplies of goods or services. Person supplying any services through an e-commerce operator who is required to collect tax at source under section 52. Manufacturer of ice cream, pan masala, tobacco, aerated waters, fly ash bricks, fly ash aggregate, fly ash blocks, bricks of fossil meals or similar siliceous earths, building bricks, earthen or roofing tiles. Supplier who is either a casual taxable person or a non-resident taxable person. Supplier of services save as provided in the section 10 subsection 1. Registered person who is not eligible for composition scheme under 10 subsection 2a. Supplier engaged in making supply of goods or services which are not leviable to tax. Supplier engaged in making any interstate outward supplies of goods or services. Person supplying any services through an e-commerce operator who is required to collect tax at source under section 52. Manufacturer of notified goods or supplier of notified services. Supplier who is either a casual taxable person or a non-resident taxable person. There is no restriction on composition supplier to receive interstate inward supplies of goods or services. A person engaged in marginal supply of services other than restaurant service also eligible for composition scheme under section 10 subsection 1 second proviso to section 10 subsection 1 read with section 10 subsection 2 clause A. Fundamentally, the composition scheme under section 10 subsection 1 can primarily be availed in respect of goods and only one service, namely restaurant service. However, there are cases where a manufacturer or trader is also engaged in supply of services other than restaurant service, though the percentage of such supply of services is very small as compared to the supplies of goods. There may also be cases where a restaurant service provider is also engaged in supplying a small percentage of other services with a view to enable such taxpayers to avail of the benefit of composition scheme under section 10 subsection 1 second proviso to section 10 subsection 1 permits marginal supply of services for a specified value along with the supply of goods and or service as the case may be. This value specified is this specified value is value not exceeding 10% of the turnover in a state or union territory in the preceding financial year or rupees 5 lakhs, whichever is higher. Thus, it can be inferred that where the turnover of a registered person opting for composition scheme under section 10 subsection 1 is up to 50 lakhs in the preceding financial year, he can supply services up to a maximum value of 5 lakhs in the current financial year. Further, where the turnover of a registered person opting for composition scheme is more than 50 lakhs and up to 1.5 crores in the preceding financial year, he can supply services other than restaurant services in the current financial year up to a maximum value of 10% of the turnover in a state or union territory in the preceding financial year. Ram Sevak is engaged in supply of goods. His turnover in preceding financial year is 60 lakhs. Since his aggregate turnover in the preceding financial year does not exceed 1.5 crores, he is eligible for composition scheme under section 10 subsection 1 in the current financial year. Further, in current financial year, he can supply services other than restaurant services up to a value of not exceeding 10% of 60 lakhs or 5 lakhs, whichever is higher. Thus, he can supply services up to a value of 6 lakhs in current financial year. If the value of services supplied exceeds 6 lakhs, he becomes ineligible for the composition scheme under section 10 subsection 1 and has to opt out of the same. Interest income is to be excluded for determining the value of turnover in a state or union territory under second proviso to section 10 subsection 1. Generally, businesses tend to save and invest money in the form of deposits, loans, or advances. However, this way they get engaged in supply of service by way of extending deposits, loans, or advances, a service other than restaurant service, and where the income from such services cause the value of services supplied to exceed the value referred in second proviso to section 10 subsection 1, 10% of the turnover in the preceding financial year in a state or union territory or rupees 5 lakhs, whichever is higher. Said business would have become ineligible for the composition scheme under section 10 subsection 1 and one has to opt out of the composition scheme. This can cause a lot of hardship to small businesses. In view of the above, an explanation is inserted after second proviso to section 10 subsection 1 to clarify that for the purposes of second proviso to section 10 subsection 1, the value of supply of exempt services by way of extending deposits, loans, or advances insofar as the consideration is represented by way of interest or discount, shall not be taken into account for determining the value of turnover in a state or union territory. Under second proviso to section 10 subsection 1, a registered person opting for composition scheme may supply services other than restaurant services of value not exceeding 10% of the turnover in the preceding financial year in a state or union territory, or 5 lakh, whichever is higher. Thus, while computing value of services other than restaurant services as referred in this proviso, interest on loans, deposits, or advances will not be taken into account. Conditions and restrictions for composition levy. Rule number 5. Person opting for composition levy has to comply with the following conditions. He shall pay tax under section 9 subsection 3 9 subsection 4 on inward supply of goods or services or both. He is neither a casual taxable person nor a resident taxable person. He shall mention the words composition taxable person not eligible to collect tax on supplies at the top of the bill of supply issued by him, and he shall mention the words composition taxable persons on every notice or signboard displayed at a prominent place at his principal place of business and at every additional place or places of business. Further, where the goods held in stock by him are liable to be taxed under reverse charge under section 9 subsection 4, the tax thereon has been paid under reverse charge under section 9 subsection 4. In addition to the above conditions, a registered person opting for composition scheme under section 10 subsection must not be engaged in the manufacture of goods as notified under section 10 subsection 2 clause E during the preceding financial year. Following goods have been hereby notified by notification number 14: ice cream and other edible ice, whether or not containing cocoa; pan masala, all goods of tobacco and manufactured tobacco substitutes; aerated waters; fly ash bricks, fly ash aggregate, fly ash blocks; bricks of fossil meals or similar siliceous earths; building bricks, earthen or roofing tiles. Intimation of opting for composition levy. Rules 3 and 4. Intimation by person applying for registration. Any person who is not registered and applies for registration may give an option to pay tax under composition levy in Part B of the registration form, viz. Form GST Reg 01. The same shall be considered as an intimation to pay tax under composition levy. Such intimation shall be considered only after the grant of registration to the applicant. The option to pay tax under composition levy shall be effective from the date from which registration is effective. Intimation by a registered person. A registered person who opts to pay tax under composition levy scheme shall electronically file an intimation in prescribed form on the GST common portal. The intimation shall be filed prior to the commencement of the financial year for which the said option is exercised. He shall also furnish the statement in prescribed form in accordance with the provisions of Rule 44 of CGST rules within 60 days from the commencement of the relevant financial year. Any intimation in respect of any place of business in a state or union territory shall be deemed to be an intimation in respect of all other places of business registered on the same PAN. The option to pay tax under composition levy shall be effective from the beginning of the financial year. A person applying for registration can opt for composition at the time of applying for registration, and composition levy shall be effective from the date from which registration is effective. A registered person can opt for composition scheme from the beginning of any financial year, and composition levy shall be effective from the beginning of the said financial year. Intimation for opting to pay tax under composition scheme must be filed prior to the commencement of the financial year for which said option is exercised. Okay, point number 9. Validity of composition levy. Withdrawal from the composition scheme by a taxpayer who ceases to satisfy any of the prescribed conditions. The option exercised by a registered person to pay amount under composition levy shall remain valid so long as he satisfies all the conditions mentioned in the relevant section and rules. For instance, the option to pay tax under composition scheme lapses from the day on which aggregate turnover of a registered person exceeds the specified limit during the financial year. Such person is required to pay tax under regular scheme under section 9 subsection 1 from the day he ceases to satisfy any of the conditions prescribed for composition levy. He shall issue tax invoice for every taxable supply made thereafter. Further, he is required to file an intimation for withdrawal from the scheme in the prescribed form within 7 days of the occurrence of such event. The effective date from which withdrawal from the composition scheme shall take effect shall be the date indicated by him in his intimation, but such date may not be prior to the commencement of the financial year in which such intimation is being filed. Withdrawal from the composition scheme by a taxpayer who intends to withdraw from the said scheme. The registered person who intends to withdraw from the composition scheme shall, before the date of such withdrawal, file an application in the prescribed form. The effective date from which withdrawal from the composition scheme shall take effect shall be the date indicated by him in his application, but such date may not be prior to the commencement of the financial year in which such application for withdrawal is being filed. Denial of option to pay tax under composition scheme by tax authorities. Where the proper officer has reasons to believe that the registered person was not eligible to pay tax under composition scheme or has contravened the provisions of the CGST or provisions of this chapter, he may issue a show cause notice to such person. In case of denial of option to pay tax under composition levy by the tax authorities, the effective date of such denial shall be from a date including any retrospective date as may be determined by tax authorities. However, such effective date shall not be prior to the date of contravention of the provisions of CGST or Act or rules. In each of the above cases, such person may furnish a statement in prescribed form containing details of the stock of inputs and inputs contained in the semi-finished or finished goods held in stock by him on the date on which the option is withdrawn or denied within a period of 30 days from the date from which the option is withdrawn or from the date of the order denying composition scheme. Any intimation or application for withdrawal or denial of the option to pay tax under section 10 in respect of any place of business in any state or union territory shall be deemed to be an intimation in respect of all other places of business registered on the same PAN. A person availing composition scheme during a financial year crosses the turnover of 1.5 crores on 9th of November. The option availed shall lapse from the date on which his aggregate turnover during the year exceeds 1.5 crores, that is on 9th December in this case. The composition scheme to be adopted uniformly by all the registered persons having the same PAN, proviso to section 10 subsection 2 and 10 subsection 2a. All registered persons having the same PAN have to opt for the composition scheme. If one such registered person opts for normal scheme, others become ineligible for composition scheme. Composition scheme supplier cannot collect tax. Okay. Composition scheme supplier cannot enter into credit chain. Okay. Imposition of penalty in case of irregular availment of the composition scheme. If a taxable person has paid tax under the composition scheme, though he was not eligible for the scheme, the person would be liable to penalty, and the provisions of section 73 and 74 of the CGST Act shall be applicable for determination of tax and penalty. Okay, so we have completed these two segments also. So we are not going to study anything new for today because of the backlog. Quite so many pages we had to read today. On that note, let us wrap up today's study session. I will meet you tomorrow. Thank you and bye bye.